Do you love warm, witty, charming books? If so, today's author spotlight video is for you. I am going to share all about one of my newly discovered, very favorite authors, D.E. Stevenson. Come along, let's learn all about her and her books. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome back to my reading life and welcome to another author spotlight video. This is the fourth video in my author spotlight series. If you want to check out the first 3 videos in the series, I will have a link to the playlist down in the description box below, so be sure to check that out after you watch this video. Now, in these author spotlight videos, we are going to deep dive into one author that I love. And today, thank you to my Book Jenny's Patreon group for voting on this particular author. We are going to dive into the life and world and stories of D.E. Stevenson. So grab yourself a cuppa and let's dive in. To start off with, we are going to dive a little bit into the life of D.E. Stevenson. D.E. Stevenson is a Scottish writer. She was born in 1892 and she died in 1973. D.E. Stevenson published over 45 novels and a few poetry collections in her lifetime. And then in 2011 and 2013, 3 more novels and 2 story and essay collections were discovered and published. She was born Dorothy Emily Stevenson, and she is a relative of Robert Louis Stevenson. Her father was a cousin of Robert Louis Stevenson, and even though that was the case, D.E. Stevenson's family did not approve of her writing. And in fact, her father forbid her to go to university for fear that she would become a blue stocking and not be able to attract a husband. But despite all of that, D.E. Stevenson did write. She wrote in secret, and she published her first novel despite her family's disapproval. And that first novel didn't really get much attention, and it wasn't until her second novel was published 9 years later, Mrs. Tim of the Regiment, that she really found her acclaim. She was actually coaxed by a friend into publishing Mrs. Tim of the Regiment, which is based in large part upon her own personal diaries and her life as an army wife. She married James Peploe, an army officer, in 1916, and they had 4 children. Unfortunately, their oldest daughter died of the measles while she was away at school. But D.E. Stevenson kept extensive journals throughout her life, and these are what she based the Mrs. Tim books on. So I think we can safely say when we are reading Mrs. Tim, we are getting a little bit of a glimpse into what D.E. Stevenson's life was really like. She was most prolific in the 1950s and 1960s, and from 1952 to 1969, she published 1 novel a year. Her final novel being Gerald and Elizabeth, which was published before her husband's death. Her book sold more than 7 million copies during her lifetime. So what happened? She long went out of print, out of fashion, I think just because of the changes in the world, in social mores, in what people were interested in reading about, particularly during the 1960s and 1970s. But fortunately, today in 2026, we are not bereft of her books. Her books have been reprinted and republished by a number of different publishers, which I will get into in a minute. And so her books are fairly widely available, most of them anyway, not all of them yet. But let's hope that soon all of her books will be back in print and easily accessible to all of us. So how to describe the works of D.E. Stevenson? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, she is warm, witty, and charming. She is domestic. There's always a little bit of romance. There is a quote-unquote middlebrow quality to her books. And middlebrow is often used as a derogatory term to mean books that were not highbrow, books that were not worthy of book awards and becoming classics. And yet her books really do stand the test of time. And as one novelist described her books, they are a soothing balm at times of stress and exhaustion and are wonderful to read in today's troubled times. I can't think of a better description of her books than that. They are truly like a balm to the soul. And as Rupert Heath, the publisher for Dean Street Press, said, she had the popular writer's genius for speaking to all her readers about the concerns of their daily lives in a way that was warm, intelligent, and funny. I 100% agree. I honestly can't think of an author I have turned to more in recent years than D.E. Stevenson when I am seeking cozy comfort and calm in my reading life. And while there are tension and sometimes bad things happen in a D.E. Stevenson novel, everything always works out okay. It is all about day-to-day slice of life, real people with real problems, real lives, and there is just something so wonderful about reading the stories of people who were made up 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago that still seem relatable to us today. And our ability to read many of D.E. Stevenson's books these days is thanks to 4 specific publishing houses, and that is Bloomsbury, Source Books, Persephone Books, and Dean Street Press's Furrowed Middlebrow imprint. So if you are looking to find D.E. Stevenson's books, new books, ebooks, audiobooks, these are the publishers we have to thank for that. Now you can also seek out vintage editions of D.E. Stevenson books. I have a couple in my collection that I'm going to share with you momentarily, but they are hard to find and often quite expensive. But I think if you do a little digging, or maybe you just happen to come upon one in the wild, definitely snatch it up because they are, as I said, quite elusive these days as she gains popularity. Which is all a good thing, but it does make it hard to collect those vintage editions. And did you know that if you are a fan of D.E. Stevenson's work, you can call yourself a Desi? I am definitely a Desi. I'd love to know if you are too. I thought I would share a few of the different editions that are currently being published by D.E. Stevenson. I don't have the Bloomsbury edition of Mrs. Tim of the Regiment, though I'm hoping to get myself a copy very soon. And I also don't have any of the Persephone editions. They have published Miss Bunkle's book and Miss Bunkle Married, and perhaps one other. I will have a link to those all in the description box below though, so that you can check them out. But I do have a number of the source book editions. This is Celia's House, and this is one of the books that I have not yet read by D.E. Stevenson, but I'm looking forward to getting to very soon. And then of course I have the Dean Street Press editions of her books. This is Young Mrs. Savage, another one I still have yet to read. And all of the Furrowed Middlebrow books feature the house outline, and then there is a piece of artwork in the center there to go along with the story. I just love these editions. I think they are so lovely and colorful, and I will show you my entire collection of them momentarily. But I did also want to just share the 2 vintage editions of her books that I have in my collection. And first up is Still Glides the Stream. And again, another one I still have yet to read, but I managed to secure this vintage edition of it. It is a little bit worn, but still in pretty good condition. So forward to reading this one soon. I do also have an ebook edition of this one, so I might read it that way just to keep this vintage edition in as good a condition as I can. And then the most recent addition to my D.E. Stevenson collection. I am so thrilled about this. This book is in pristine condition. It is so beautiful, and that is Fletcher's End. Look at this gorgeous vintage cover. It's in really excellent condition. I am really hoping that at some point I can track down Belle Lamington edition that goes with this, hopefully in just as good a condition as this one is, but I'm so thrilled to have this. This is one of my favorite D.E. Stevenson books. Dean Street Press is actually republishing both Belle Lamington and Fletcher's End, which is a little duology, this July. So you can get your hands on those very soon. I will have a link where you can pre-order them down below. So be sure to go and check that out. They are, again, as I said, 2 of my favorite books by D.E. Stevenson. And we're going to get into more of my favorites in just a moment. But before that, I'm going to give you a quick glimpse at all of the D.E. Stevenson books that I currently have in my possession. These are both read and unread, again, in both the source books and Dean Street Press editions, as well as my 2 vintage editions. So take a look through my collection, and then come on back and we're going to talk through some of my very favorite books. I hope you enjoyed that glimpse at the books that I currently have on my shelves by D.E. Stevenson. I am planning to collect all of her books if I can get editions of them. I'm hoping that Dean Street Press will continue to republish the books of hers that they have not yet published, and I will continue to also seek out vintage editions as well. See if I'll be lucky enough to come across any more to add to my slowly growing collection. But now let us go through my top 5 D.E. Stevenson books of what I have read so far. So I have read 21 D.E. Stevenson books to date. And of those 21 books, I am going to share my top 5-ish, 5-ish books with you right now. We're going to start with number 5 and work our way up to my number 1 favorite book by D.E. Stevenson. I think truly, any of these would be fabulous places to start with her, but you can decide once you hear a little bit about what each of these books are about. First up, the number 5 spot is Listening Valley. In Listening Valley, we are following Tanya, and she has grown up in the Scottish countryside and thinks that she will always sort of live the life she's been living. She has a sister, they're very close, and their parents are not the best. Let's just put it that way. Then her sister gets married and leaves home, and things in Tanya's world start to change, open up, and she ends up moving to London, and that really sort of helps her kind of come of age and really helps her to blossom and grow. And this is just such a lovely story. I loved Tanya as a character. If you like that sort of coming of age style of book, then I definitely think you should give Listening Valley a read. It is just, it's wonderful. It's quintessential D.E. Stevenson. I think this makes a great place to start, or if you're already a fan of D.E. Stevenson and you haven't yet read this one, definitely add it to your TBR. Next up is one of the earliest books that I read by D.E. Stevenson, an instant favorite of mine, and for quite a long time I think this was my number 1 favorite. It has just slowly been usurped by a few other books that I absolutely love. Just a smidge more than this one, but I love this book so much, and that is Victoria Cottage. And Victoria Cottage is actually the first book in the Daring family trilogy. And in this, we are following Carolyn Daring, and she's a widow with 3 grown children, and we are just following her as she goes about her life living in Victoria Cottage in her small English village, and just all of the sort of goings on with her children and her concerns about them and what they are up to or not up to, and her relationships with her friends in the village. And it is just so fabulous. I think Carolyn Daring is such a wonderful character. And I know a lot of people love the Daring family trilogy. Most people talk about Music in the Hills or Winter and Rough Weather as being their favorites. And those books actually focus on another part of the Daring family. And Carolyn really doesn't focus in those books. And she is just a character that I absolutely fell in love with. So again, I really think you do need to read the Daring family trilogy in order, starting with Victoria Cottage. And I'd love to know if you feel the same about Carolyn. She just felt like a kindred spirit. So if you are looking for someone like that, someone that you can really relate to, then I think you should absolutely give Victoria Cottage a read. In the number 3 spot, I actually have 2 books, one of which was the very first D.E. Stevenson book that I read and will just always hold a special place in my heart. And the next book is the follow-up to that. And those 2 books are Miss Bunkle's book and Miss Bunkle Married. I have such a hard time deciding which one of these I love more. I think Miss Bunkle Married just slightly edges out Miss Bunkle's book because I love all of the domestic details in Miss Bunkle Married, but you really do need to read Miss Bunkle's book first. It is a fabulous book. Miss Bunkle is so fun. She's so quirky. She lives in a small English village and she has had some sort of oh gosh, what do they call that in England? Not an allowance, but like, you know, money that she's been receiving. And that is slowly dwindling away and she needs to do something and she decides to write a book. But she doesn't think she has any kind of imagination, and so she writes about what she knows, which is all of the people who live in her village. And she very loosely disguises them in the book, and the book is published to great success. And of course, the villagers get wind of it and they are suddenly on a warpath to discover who wrote this book, because she wrote it under a pseudonym, and we follow along from there. It is just so much fun. If you need a book to cheer you up, to lift your spirits, to just immerse yourself in, then Miss Bunkle's book is it. And then immediately follow it up with Miss Bunkle Married. This little duo of a book set is just wonderful. I cannot say enough good things about it. And they are a little bit different in style and tone than D.E. Stevenson's other books, but I think you will love them regardless. It still has her wonderful, witty, warm, charming style, and they're just a delight. Pure delight. And then in the number 2 spot, we again have 2 books. This is a little duology, which I've already mentioned. And this number 2 spot goes to Belle Lamington and Fletcher's End. I adore these 2 books. I am so excited that Dean Street Press is republishing these 2 books finally, and that I can have them in the Furrowed Middle Brow editions on my shelf physically to read, because they are so wonderful. I listened to the audiobooks of both of them and absolutely just could not put them down. I love Belle Lamington. We start out, she's in London and she's living a sort of slightly sad, slightly isolated life in her London flat, and she works in an office job and she's got a bit of a romance happening, but it's maybe not the best situation. And then suddenly things in Belle's life start to change. So we follow what happens to her in Belle Lamington, and then we continue the story in Fletcher's End. Please do not read anything about Fletcher's End before you read Belle Lamington. Just go into Belle Lamington, read it, and then dive right into Fletcher's End. You don't want to have any spoilers, because I can't even tell you what Fletcher's End is about because it will spoil Belle Lamington for you. So all I can say is they're wonderful. Again, I love Belle Lamington. Fletcher's End is so very domestic, along the lines of Miss Bunkle Married, only more so. And so this little duology, Fletcher's End probably has the top spot in my heart, but they are both wonderful. And again, you need to read them in order. I can't recommend them enough. Get yourself on the pre-order list for the Dean Street Press editions, which are coming out. I will have links in the description box below, as I mentioned before. And yes, I love these books, and I will continue to gush about them for as long as I possibly can. And I will have to say, up until just last week, Belle Lamington and Fletcher's End were the number 1 spot as my favorite, and they have only narrowly been edged out, possibly just until I reread them, and then they might take the top spot again. So we've got a very narrow margin between my number 5 pick and my number 1 pick. They're all so very close. I love them all. But this book, which I just finished, I just was so surprised by it. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, and it was so fabulous. And that is 5 Windows. And I wasn't expecting to love this one as much because it has a male protagonist and we are being told the story from his perspective. So we are following David, and we follow him from a young boy up until he is a grown young man still. And the way we follow him is through 5 different windows in the rooms that he lives in throughout this time of his life. So from his childhood home up until his final 5th window, and you just see sort of all the different viewpoints of his life as sort of reflected through these 5 windows. And I just loved David. I thought he was a fabulous character. One of the windows is in a room above a bookstore, and I couldn't love that more if I tried. I wish I could have lived above a bookstore. I guess maybe I still could at some point in my life, though I don't see how at this point. But how fabulous would that be? David is just, he's charming, he's insightful, he's very introspective. And I thought D.E. Stevenson did such a wonderful job of giving him a voice. And apparently this was D.E. Stevenson's favorite book to write. And I have to say that it was my favorite book of hers to read to date, subject to change at any moment. I cannot recommend this one enough. Again, it's slightly different than some of her other books, and I think maybe that's also what I loved about it, that it just had a slightly different spin to it, but it was just wonderful. I loved it, if you can't tell. So there you have my top 5 D.E. Stevenson books. If you are looking for a place to start, if you're not yet a Desi, but you would like to become one, I highly recommend these. If you are a Desi and you have not read any of these books that I have listed here, then definitely move them up your TBR because I think they deserve a read. They are fabulous. And that is going to wrap up this author spotlight video on D.E. Stevenson. Let us chat all things Desis down in the comments below. I would love to know, are you a D.E. Stevenson fan? Are you just discovering her? Have you been reading her for decades? Let us talk all things D.E. Stevenson and tell me, what are your favorite D.E. Stevenson novels down in the comments below. So let us share all things D.E. Stevenson, Desis, witty, charming, warm, wonderful books down in the comments. And if you're here but you don't have anything you'd like to add, but you'd like to let me know that you were here because comments really do help my channel, well, of course, I think nothing goes better with D.E. Stevenson than a cuppa and maybe a slice of cake. So leave me a cuppa and some cake down in the comments below, and just to let me know you were here if you don't have anything you'd like to add to the conversation. And if you enjoyed this author spotlight video, if you could hit that like button and the hype button if you're on the YouTube mobile app, I would really appreciate it. It does help new viewers to find my videos and my channel. And if you are a new viewer and you haven't yet subscribed, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and join my cozy bookish community. Thank you all for being here, for your lovely comments on my most recent videos, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend it with me. As always, I'll be back with another video very soon, and until then, I wish you a good book and a warm cuppa. Bye!